All right, Joel Gausten here from joelgausten.com. This conversation is one I've been really looking forward to. As many of my viewers and subscribers know, I am a drummer, and it's always a joy to connect with drummers and speak the language of drumming and the history of such. And my guest, I've got to tell you, this guy has one of the most fascinating careers and histories in drumming I've ever seen. And he's involved with some dear friends of mine who've been on this channel in the past. So I definitely want to spend time talking about that as well. But before we get into all that, it's my great pleasure to introduce currently from Las Vegas, Mr. Brian Irving. Brian, it's a pleasure having you here.
Thank you, Joel. Nice to be here. Thanks for asking.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And as I said, we have so many different directions we could go in. You've been playing out in Los Angeles primarily for 40 plus years at this point. You've worked with some greats, as I said, many of whom have been prior guests to this channel. So we have a lot of things we can get into. But let's kind of start really at the very beginning for you. When did music sort of enter your world, and specifically, when did drumming take front and center as far as your musical interest?
Uh, Actually, a little on the late side. Uh, probably, uh, probably 12, 13, 14 years old. I had taken bass lessons, and I quickly realized that frankly, I just felt I didn't have the look, and it just didn't come naturally. And one night, my dad came home and brought me these massive baseball bat drumsticks, and I could just never put them down as long as I did my homework first. And I was just beating on everything. And first Christmas, I got a Japanese drum set Crown. That was a phenomenal, beautiful color, and set it up wrong. And then it was, seeing the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. Just, I mean, my eyes were like saucers. And I had already had that before picking up sticks, and it was really influenced by the Dave Clarke Five, who the actual real drummer was Bobby Graham, but just that real stomping kind of feel. And my lessons were, I don't know if any, we didn't have headphones. I had one little plug that went in my ear. And after homework, I turned on KRLA or XERB with Wolfman Jack or KHJ, and I played every song that was on the radio back to back, which would have been Motown, which would be Four on the Floor, or Ramblin' Gamblin' Man, or then it would be Hendrix, or all kinds of different bands. And I might not have played them right, but it was the greatest tool. Also, help keep you right on the beat,
Mm.
and play just everything. And little by little, started in one band and tried to. Generally, I knew right away play with guys that were older than me, which I figured were guys that were more experienced than me, and that really pushed me quickly to learn fast and to listen really, which is the biggest lesson is to listen to everybody. Don't just be pounding and blowing and not listening to what other people are doing. And then it grew from there.
Are you originally from California?
Yeah, I'm originally from the San Francisco Bay Area, Berkeley, and my aunt had a coffee house on Telegraph leading up to UC Berkeley. So I remember the Berkeley riots,
Mm.
and Carlos Santana used to play at my aunt's little restaurant. So yeah, I'm still somewhat mentally steeped in that San Francisco vibe, but we came down when I was young to Los Angeles
Mhm.
because of the weather, and that's where I started playing. And quickly, I realized there was a community there that was quickly available. I have a lot of friends in the Bay Area that are musicians, and there is a community there, but it's sometimes hard to get across the bay for rehearsals, or it's the geography is a little bit more challenging,
Mhm.
and so this worked out great for me.
So, uh, based on what I know about your recorded history and your performance history, you kind of hit the LA music scene late 70s, early 80s.
Correct.
So, and I know from speaking to some mutual friends that we'll be mentioning shortly, the late 70s LA scene was truly something. You had these massive bands coming through, Van Halen playing the Whiskey, and the start of that, and classic clubs. How would you best define that period of time for you as not only somebody kind of working within it, but as just an observer and as a fan of what was happening in those days?
It was so dynamic, and there were so many different kinds of music, and so many different venues that featured those different types of music. But for example, I had mentioned Van Halen before at the Whiskey, and I used to record them before they ever got signed because I knew they were going to be the biggest damn band in the world. I got great bootlegs. But they would always have the show opened by a punk band, pretty hardcore band, like the Dickies would open, and Lauren and the Dogs. And so I would be exposed to some of those. In one instance, I rehearsed at a storage yard, and there was a band across the storage yard that became Wall of Voodoo, and they were completely different from what we were doing. And then so we would show up to some of these other venues. But there was a real strong punk scene at the Mask, and for a while that was the kind of music I was playing. We'd do 22 songs in a set; they'd be like 2 minutes long, and as part of that, I hooked up with a keyboard player from Nick Gilder's band, and we were doing a really quirky, punky thing. And come to find out, years later, the guy was a PhD in music. It's like Sting, how when they got going, the Police got going, they were doing what people thought was kind of punk music. This guy's a PhD in music. I'm playing with this guy from Nick Gilder, and the guy really knew how to play, but we were doing kind of dumb, not dumb, we were doing like smart, clever, punky music. And through that, I think our first demos, Earl Mankey recorded from 2020, and from one band, kind of leads to another. Just a couple of years after that, I played with Glenn Cornick from Jethro Tull. How the heck do I go from this playing at a storage unit and then meeting these other musicians? And I needed road cases for my drums, and there was an article in the Craigslist, and the guy had road cases. I go to meet him, and it's Glenn Cornick from Jethro Tull. I used to go see them in high school. I'm not going to tell him that. And they were Tom Mooney's old cases from the band Paris, which was a great band with Bob Welch. And they were for a big bass drum. And he goes, "What are you going to do with these?" And I said, "I got a 26. That's what I play." And he goes, "You do?" "Yeah." And he goes, "You want to jam?" "Yeah." Who else? You're not going to want to jam with Glenn Cornick, one of the most phenomenal bass players. And we clicked. And Glenn and I put a band together called Strings, which was bass guitar, drums, keyboards, violin, viola, and cello. So it was very Beatlesque, but with Glenn Cornick on bass. And I'm playing a 26-inch bass drum, but kind of boom whack that fits more of a Beatlesque kind of thing, which was very different than the punk thing that I'd been doing just 2 years before. So these are how these crazy meetings and how I go from one type of music to the other.
Well, I think that's a great point about Los Angeles, even I would imagine to this day. I lived in LA for about 3 years in the early 2000s, and that was very much my experience too. You would just run into people at the gas station or the convenience store, or I lived in the Valley. I was in Tarzana at the time. And I'd go across the street to the local club, the small club, and you'd see Eric Singer and John Corabi up there jamming, and or you go to like the Baked Potato in Studio City, and you'd see a lot of those cats up there playing. So it wasn't this big thing like, oh, these are legendary musicians. They have to live somewhere, and they live in your neighborhood, and you're going to run into these people.
Yeah.
And that's something you really learn just being in LA. It's very unique in that respect. And the world gets so minuscule the longer you're out there.
Yeah,
And then, everybody needs a musician, right? So it's always, I'm playing the whiskey on Friday. Do you know a guy? Yeah, call Brian, call whoever. And that's how it just kind of keeps going and going and going.
very interesting because on the way driving out, I listened to your interview with Phil X,
Hmm.
and I'm giggling because of like, well, I know some of these guys, and I like, how the hell did you hook up with Brent? I know Brent over here, and yeah, that's how it works. And then of course, as you play more, the word gets out, good or bad, preferably good. And oh, you need this kind of thing, call that guy, and this, he'll do his homework, and you'll be off and running. Um, and it's in that way that I would pick up a lot of these gigs. That's how I met Spedding through somebody else. I met Lauren as he'd come to see me playing some other band and stopped me in the hallway and says, we got to play together someday. And I said, I would love that. And it took about 4 or 5 years, and then he called me. He's like, I got this thing, this glitter trash thing, and it's going to be really high energy but slamming. And uh, that was a connection that had started about 4 years ago,
Mm.
and or prior to that, I should say. And that's why even playing some of the small clubs, I always have in the back of my mind, you don't know who's going to be out there watching or listening, and there may be 4 people, or there may be 40 or 400, but there might be something interesting along the way, and that has borne out for me so many times.
Absolutely. I am wondering when the gears were starting to spin for you out in LA and you were starting to work with different people, um, from my experience, particularly in LA, there are kind of two different classes of drummers. There are the guys and gals who will commit to a band. I'm in this band, all for one, one for all. Their career is going to rise or fall based on that band. But then you have the people who are kind of the ones who people do call. You know, they need a producer's got some cash. He needs a guy to lay down a really solid beat. Okay, call this guy. And there's that whole sort of communal scene in that respect. Did you go into this kind of wanting to be the guy who got the call versus being the guy who committed to a band and you're going to be in this band until the bitter end, no matter what?
Well, I must tell you, I absolutely understand both ends of that spectrum. I I think I would add that we're in this. Well, boys, we're in this till the death. Was really something of and a lot of people that I play with talk about that. That was something of a little bit prior era, and I absolutely was a proponent of that, and I would commit to something absolutely all the way. At a certain point, maybe one's age has to do with that, where you figure I don't like to dwell on how long I can keep playing and keep playing to the level that I want to play. But and maybe some of that is a function or a factor of the more people that one has met, and that increases the number of calls. I would like to be that guy in the band, till the death, but that just really, unless you're up and signed. In fact, even for signed band guys are doing side things. It really just is. I have to say, is not the model anymore.
Yeah.
I wish it was. I feel a bit guilty because I can only be stretched, so far, and I do my homework for that. So, before you go to rehearsal, I practice, for days before that rehearsal. But that model has really changed, Joel.
Yeah, and I also think even when I was out there, I noticed that you had very, very successful musicians, guys who'd fill arenas.
Mhm.
Um, there would be like a year or two between tours or album cycles. Well, those guys have to keep working, or
Yeah,
they
that's
they
crazy.
have to keep, doing their thing in front of an audience. And that's how you'd find, in my case, I'd go to like the little clubs, like the neighborhood places, and you'd see
Mhm.
guys that, were between stadium tours, because they've got to do something, they've got to keep the momentum going. And that's something I found very interesting. I'm from New Jersey. We didn't have that. So when I moved to LA, it was a tremendous education about just being a working musician. And sometimes you think, oh, so and so's playing with an arena act, well, it's still a job. And when the gigs aren't happening, they've got to fill those dates. So they're doing session work, they're doing this, they're doing a commercial or whatever it may be.
Absolutely. There is the factor of supporting oneself or family. I was listening to another drummer, and actually I was reading about a guitar player that he used to work with, and reading an interview with him, and he says, "Well, as long as I can take care of my kids and my health insurance, those were his big concerns. I'm not. It's not funny. It's dead serious." So there are those motivations. There's also the motivations. The way that I would explain it, I've got to keep playing. I don't want to get creatively fat, and I kind of have to keep swimming forward. And I like doing different things. I do a little sort of semi-acoustic thing now, and I've done a couple of country things, and I find to try to do those best I can. I find that really challenging to serve the song, and I'm a song guy after all. I mean, the Beatles are my earliest influence, and boy, there's song textbooks right there on verses, choruses. Hey, let's start this song with a chorus or bridges, and for me, I just have to keep my mind going.
Absolutely. And I think it's about maintaining that hunger too. And, once you reach a certain level, you never stop acting as if you're not at that level. You know what I mean? Because um,
Yes.
no names mentioned, but somebody we both know who was a very successful drummer, um, was in that kind of between stage, and he had a fellow band member who had just put out, I think it was a DVD or back then, or some new record, and they're both very famous people, and it's like we got to get club dates, we got to push this CD, he's got to sell records, so yeah, these guys are monolithic artists, but they're like, okay, the calendar's empty, we got to fill that calendar, and that's why I think,
It's more about filling the calendar than for the dough.
right,
It's to keep moving, or they've had this pet project that isn't what the stadium thing is, and
right.
so it is more rewarding. It may be more rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. And just keeps the train going. There's this, I'm reminded there's this classic scene from a documentary on Joan Rivers.
Mhm.
Joan Rivers had been around forever, right?
Sure.
And she's getting on there in years. This is towards the end of her life, and she's in her office and she's going through her calendar. She has an entire month open. She goes, I'm terrified of this. This scares the hell out of me because she's not working. And you figure she's arrived, right? But
Right.
she's like, this is not good. This has to change. Calendar's not full.
I totally understand that. We've all seen artists of, not even necessarily musicians, but comedians or whatever. They just, you know, they have to keep doing it.
Ab-
I can respect that if you have that, that artistry. Hopefully it always flickers, and it's always lit.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. I wanted to get into one specific band, mid 80s era, which would be Another Language with Tom Petersson from Cheap Trick. I think most Cheap Trick fans know there was a time in the 80s when Tom had, gone off on his own for a while. He came back into the band right before Lap of Luxury and their big kind of second wave in their career. But you had connected with Another Language, which I always loved. I love that record. I dig that band because I'm a big like new wave guy. Uh,
Yeah.
so for me, it kind of hit all the buttons, checked off all the key elements that I was digging for that style of music.
Yeah.
Uh, how did that connection come about with Tom?
that was really an odd one because probably my meat and potatoes and what I love is a band called Free, and the drummer is Simon Kirk. And the music, for anybody out there that's not familiar with that, all musicians will be, but anybody that's watching, it's really spare, and the spaces speak volumes. So that's where my mindset was. Some of my friends loved Cheap Trick, and I kind of didn't get it.
Hmm.
Uh, and I was working in a recording studio. I used to do commercials for Metro Media and station IDs, and that would sound like other songs. So I'd play the song that sounded like the Beach Boys, and then another time I'd play, these were only 15 or 20-second songs. But the studio owner remembered me, and somehow he knew, somehow he had somebody who knew Tom Petersson and heard that Tom had the band together. They had already recorded the album. I did not play on the album, but he was trying to put a band together to put the thing out. By the way, I just thought of it. That studio, I used to go in when I used to do the commercials. There were two other drummers that used to do commercials there also. You may never have heard of him. Josh Freese was one. He was, I think, 12 or 13 years old.
Right.
When Josh was in there doing that same thing. And who's that guy that used to play for Guns N' Roses? Um, and he was in there also. So it's interesting all along this great journey. But anyway, the studio owner put me together and said, "Here's a phone number. Call Tom Petersson." I'm like, "Oh, geez, I don't know if we're going to speak the same language. Talk about another language." So I went and met with Tom, and he was starting from ground zero, and he was living in LA. He'd come here from Rockford because for the longest time the Cheap Trick guys were all in Rockford.
Right.
That was kind of a culture shock for him. Met with Tom, and played me the songs, and it sounded like fun. And that was also very different for me since the guy was a 12-string player, and as we all know, and I played with some amazing bass players. The first of which was Glenn Cornick from Jethro Tull. So this was a challenge to play for my style with a bass player that plays in that style, which is very different. It's like no other bass player. And he told me that he could get Tony Brock in the band. So I went, "You can get not Tony Brock, Wally Stalker from the Babies." And I love the Babies. In fact, the Babies drummer is one of my favorites, Tony Brock. And I said, "If you can get Wally Stalker, I'm in." Of course, he had no intention of getting Wally Stalker. So I'm in, and we learned the songs, and we did learn the songs from the album, and then I have a bunch of tapes. We worked up a bunch of other songs, probably half another album to do, which never came out. It turned out to be a blow up after that. We did a video for Playboy called "Girls of Rock and Roll,"
Right.
which was really interesting.
Yeah.
There was, you can imagine, it was produced by Playboy, so in every video there was nudity or and that's where I met Eric. I was kind of sitting on my road cases, and we were just, when you're doing videos or any filming, it's hurry up and wait. And our with Tom, we were sort of the name act, and so we had a big concert scene, and some of the other videos were sort of small bedroom scenes or a club. So it took ours a long time to set up. So I started yakking with Eric, and that's how we became friends. And we did the video, and really not much happened after that. There was it was Tom and his wife, that she was the singer, Dagmar.
Right.
And so there was a schism, and that was the end of that. Didn't have anything to do with the band. Ben was smoking. Ben was great. The rehearsal tapes are amazing, even beyond what was on that album. But there was a big blow up, and eventually Tom went back to Cheap Trick. Interesting, because I've been a long time dear pal with Bunny from Cheap Trick. So it's so funny. Again, small worldism, story of my life, in a good way, in a beautiful way.
Definitely.
And I'm still friends with Tom. We rarely see him, but we're still good friends, and I'm still great friends with Bunny.
Excellent. And the Eric that you just mentioned as Eric Singer, we were talking before the interview about some small world connections, and
Yeah.
Eric's a great guy. I haven't talked to him for a bit, but always liked work, dealing with Eric, and he's been in a couple of my books. And he started out, like you said, during that, because I think his first like public thing was an Olivia Newton-John video for Culture Shock. I think he's the drummer
Correct.
in that video.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, he came out and he was sleeping on a couch in Orange County, and it didn't take long for Eric's talent to be apparent, and in really a pretty short order, he was out with Lita Ford and and Black Sabbath or whatever else. The rest is history. And you know what? The guy still is a Cleveland guy and salt of the earth. I think that's a key when you were talking about when you were living in the valley. Sometimes you're able to bump into people, and and then you realize, oh, this guy's like a normal dude.
Yeah.
Some guys aren't like normal dudes. Some guys think they're somewhere else, and you avoid them like the plague. But yeah, just just be normal. Just be a good dude.
Well, yeah, that's what it is. I think there's a certain personality trait that enables people to rise and stay at that level. It's called being a decent human being. I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of musicians since I've been doing this. I've been doing this 25 years in some way, shape, or form as a music journalist. And from my experience, the biggest hassles come from the nobodies, or the indie darlings or the cult people. And you realize, well, now I know why you're a cult artist, because you're impossible to deal with. You know, people like Eric, Bill Ward, Steven Adler, I mean, these are guys who you can just go up to on the street and have a conversation with, and it's not a big deal. Hunt Sales was another example of somebody.
These people deal with a lot of people. I mean, in all of these, there's an army of people behind it that nobody ever sees, and and you better there's a real art to getting along. There's always better players than me, and always better players. But boy, part of it is being a huge part of it is being a good band member,
Yeah.
and and learning to navigate that, and not necessarily insisting that it's your way all the time. It'll be your way rarely, but maybe you get a little slice of it.
Absolutely. I want to stay on the video that you guys did, you did with Tom, because for viewers who are of a certain age who may not remember, there was something called music video at one point in time. And in the mid 80s, Playboy had a concept where they had adult music videos,
Mhm.
and it would have, whoever the Playmate of the Year happened to be in some of these videos, but perhaps more significantly, they had some of the actual musical artists themselves stripped down. I think Stacy Q is still probably the one people remember most from that. Before she became Stacy Q, she was in another band, SSQ, and they had this very, risque video, we'll call it, for its time. So that was kind of a weird concept. So, I mean, you went through that experience, what effect would you say that had on the band, if any, going in that
Yeah,
direction?
because Tom was doing that video. Tom was the bona fide musical artist, no question about it. On all the other videos, the star of each video was the Playboy cookie, whoever it was, who also maybe sang a little bit. Some of them sang great. Some of them were really, really talented. But the common denominator was they had to, take a lot of their clothes off, if not all. There was one girl that was just completely in gold or silver, like Goldfinger.
Mm.
And in our situation, to answer your question, Tom's wife had to strip down, but insisted on being covered. And of course, in Playboy, they were doing the video, but they also then there was such a thing as a print magazine, and so on the set, these guys were all the photographers were all trying to get the behind the scenes shots that they were going to use in the print magazine that the female singer in our band didn't want to be seen. So they came out. It was a little odd, and uh, it was an odd thing. I played in a couple bands with women in the band, and they were all talented, but it does make for a different chemistry, and that was a little difficult. And then if there's any schism between between that, kind of just find a neutral corner until the blood stops letting.
Right.
So it was a very interesting experience. But I met interesting people.
Oh, I can imagine. I can
It was a
imagine.
great experience playing with Tom, because it was as a rhythm section, very different than the complete polar opposite than playing with Glenn Cornick from Jethro Tull, four-string bass, and the way that Glenn would play and the way that Tom would play.
Mm.
Both beautiful things. Oh my God, what an opportunity for a drummer. But you have to listen and can't play the same way that you did over there that you did over here.
I'm trying to remember when it was, because I moved away from LA in 2006. So I've gone back a couple of times to visit, usually with Lauren actually, to see him. And I think it was either 2011 or 2015. I'd come out to see the Dogs. They were playing Al's Bar. And this all ties together beautifully because the lineup was the Dogs and Genitalia was the guest singer. This is before Lauren and Jenna started their version of Glitter Trash or
Oh,
around that
interesting.
time.
That's part of the Glitter Trash story. Very interesting part of the Glitter Trash story. Yes.
And the other band on that bill was Channel 3. And I
Yeah.
bring them up because you worked with Kim from Channel 3, correct?
Fantastic guy. We had, yeah, for a while in the 80s. Well, what a band. Sort of a put together thing, but we had a band called Bulldog, and it was a four-piece band. Bass player sang. We played around LA a lot, and audiences loved us. All original songs, very powerful. And Al Block, the singer, went on to play in Concrete Blonde.
Mhm.
The guitar player, who was up 20 at the time, one of my favorite guitar players ever. I've been lucky also to play with great players, and guitar players like Lauren, phenomenal player. But the guitar player there was a guy named Mike Dimkich, who
Right.
was, I think, 11 or 12 years in the Cult. And after that, he's still currently in Bad Religion for probably the last 10 years.
Mm.
And Kim Gardner from Channel 3, in fact, for that little window of time, he left Channel 3 to play in this put together band that was, going to be the next big thing. And we really tried and played it out there and recorded. And I can't remember the name of the producer. I was trying to think of it, but it was big punk. He had done several other well-known punk bands. But it was one of those things, you work on a project, you think you got it. Holy moly, we had the horses. That's for damn sure. And it just didn't work. We had to shake hands and move on. And
Right.
I love that band, but what great players! And Kim was a joy to play with. Good guy. And Lauren and I with Glitter Trash played at in Blackpool at the Rebellion Festival, and Glitter Trash went to Blackpool to play, and and we bumped into Kim with Channel 3 there. So again, like holy moly,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, way back with Kim.
That's excellent. And at the very start of the conversation, you mentioned Wolfman Jack. Wolfman Jack enters your orbit for a bit too, because it was around that time he executive produced something that you were involved in, correct?
Oh my God. Well, as a little kid, I don't know if you've heard of the radio station XERB, and naturally you've seen American Graffiti, and you've heard the ZZ Top song. I heard it on the X. That all refers to radio station XERB, which this mythical transmitter, 50,000 watts. Across the western states, and that was where Wolfman Jack was. And Magnificent Montague, I used to lay in bed with the sound almost all the way off and listen to Wolfman, "Are your little peaches sweet?" And it was phenomenal. And then the station, I think he was the only white guy on the station. That was the rest of them were black DJs. Montague, they used to advertise, the local barbecue place, and then the black-owned cemetery and mortuary. I mean, it was just great. Anyway, cut to years later. Again, one of these put together bands. I don't know. Somebody had seen me play and called. We're putting this thing together. It was this fellow that used to sing in Uriah Heep, mm-hmm. and a couple other talented guys. And so we recorded an album. That band was called Ringleader, and it was executive produced by Wolfman Jack. Wolfman Jack's assistant and main man, Lonnie, was the lead guitar player, and that guy was a smoke. I mean, it's the guy. Lonnie sounded like Leslie West. Played a Les Paul Jr. with P90, and he was really why I wanted to stay in that. He was a joy to play with. Oh, and the keyboard player was a guy named Jeffrey England. He was in Deep Purple too.
Right, right.
So it was talented guys, and we did this record, and it got some decent reviews. I mean, it kind of sounded like Billy Squier, because that's how the style I was playing meets Journey, and I was like big keyboards from the guy from Deep Purple, right. And then great guitar player, and me just doing sort of my Billy Squier, my Bobby Chenard drums, who I end up having another small worldism with Bobby Chenard, who we'll probably talk about.
Well, just recently, just in the last 4 weeks or so on my channel, mm-hmm. I had a guest on, and the reaction was insane. 1,000 views a day on the video. People were just so thrilled to see him and learn a little bit about his career. And his career, we can do a 10-hour conversation about. I mean, it's insane. But that was Chris Spedding. I had Chris on, yeah. And like I said, that video just went mushroom. Yeah. Oh yeah. People were so thrilled, and I still get, I'm still getting comments, 3 weeks later on that video from people. And you played with Chris, yes. And Chris is another one who's, been around, and, he's 80 and he's still recording and still doing things. How did the Spedding connection come to be?
Chris, if you didn't know anything from I watched and listened to a little bit of her interview. He's not the kind of guy that's going to go out and be meeting people, and that's not Chris. It was a bass player that I was working with in another band, and I'm not sure if she was also a rock writer for a fanzine or whatever. Anyway, somehow she knew Chris and said, "Hey, he's here in LA. And he wants to play, but he doesn't have a band, and he really wants to get out and play. You want to come out and audition? I think you might be right for it." I was told that they had auditioned a few other drummers. So I learned the songs, and it was, a lot of his classic songs, Motorbiking, Black Leather Jacket, Get Out of My Pagoda, all his list of songs. And went out and auditioned, and got the gig. And Chris I think somehow Chris knew another guitar player that they brought in, and it was really fun. It was really challenging. He and I ended up getting along really well, because I would always be there early, and he'd be there early, and sometimes some of the other guys wouldn't be there quite so early. So we'd set up and just jam to establish a musical understanding and a rapport, and I think he appreciated that. And of course, I want to play with him to learn where he's going to go, what's he going to do, what do I kind of going to expect. Even though I know we're going to be playing these songs, I want to learn how to read his language. So we ended up getting along really well, and learned the songs fairly quickly. It's interesting. After we would rehearse, we would go out and get a bite to eat. Sometimes it would be just Chris and I. I don't know if it was because, and this is many years ago, but maybe we were the oldest. Maybe it was because we sort of bonded the best in the band and spoke to each other the best. And I don't you when I play with people that have done an awful lot. I never ask, hey, what was it like playing in this band, or what was it like? Because then I'm no longer a peer.
Right.
Then I'm a fan. So I often don't find out all the juicy stories unless they come flowing out. But that's just how I deal with some other players. I'll find out later. But finally, at having dinner, I wanted to know. I didn't know if I was going to be too loud or too, boom whack, and I just asked him casually, who was the drummer before me? Bobby Chenard, which is Billy Squire's drummer, who Billy Squire, had the song "The Big Beat," and the Big Beat was Bobby Chenard, and that really set me back. I mean, that was. I know all these other guys have played with great drummers, but this was one of my personal heroes, and it made me feel. It was very humbling, and I was like, "Geez, really played with Bobby Chenard? What happened to him?" And he goes, and then in his own quiet way, he goes, "He's dead." Well, yeah, I know, but that was the shoes that I had to fill, and it worked fine. And I know that I love all of Chris's work, and he's played with some Robert Gordon.
Yes.
Say no more. You can stop right there. And I'd seen Robert Gordon several times, so I like playing roots rock style and sort of a quasi rockabilly style. It wasn't rockabilly per se, strictly speaking, with, but so that fit really well with me. I like sitting in that zone. So that was fun. We played around locally and did a couple shows. We played there was one place that used to specialize in rockabilly shows, and they had special parking for all the lead sleds and lowriders, and all the musicians used to come, and the place was just jammed. A lot of the rockabilly heroes from a few years prior would come to see us, and remember the guys from Blonde. I mean, just every guitar player that could break free on whatever nights we would play, they would come there to see Chris Spedding. And it's interesting, by you saying that you had so many views on the Spedding interview tells me you got a lot of musicians watching, and or people that read the credits. I mean, the guy's done sessions with John Lennon, Roxy Music. I mean, it's amazing, and there's a lot to learn. That's one of those things where it's just like, shut up, listen, have big ears, and do the gig. He doesn't probably want to hear what I have to say.
It was so daunting trying to figure out where to go with him. Because number one, I got connected with him because there was a particular release that the label was looking to promote, so that's always the one you kind of push up front. But I knew I had a certain period of time with him as well, which is always like, and I'm like, where do I go with this guy? Because you go to his website and he just, it's like pages and pages of interesting stuff and more small world connections. And I'm like, well, okay, I know I have a punk viewership on this channel, so we'll talk about the Pistols, and there's a rockabilly contingent on my channel. We'll talk about Robert Gordon. And but man, I'd love to sit down with him and do like a series because and yourself, I mean, someone like that who's been at it. I mean, he produced a Sex Pistols demo for God's sakes. I mean, that's how
very low key about that stuff. I mean,
yeah.
there's been a lot of discussions about that, and I was particularly interested to hear, what his answers were going to be. But I think one has to assume that his involvement on some of these things were more than what he would say, because he's so self-effacing and so British, so very British, and he's not going to be touting his own horn. That is not Chris. And so that's, I mean, I'm glad that you asked some of those things. And, I've seen the list of stuff, but I hope you can appreciate my point. I can't, when I'm playing, I can't ask them that stuff. Some of them my friends do. They'll ask, what was it like playing, for 80,000 people? I can't do it. I just want to start from ground zero and let's play together.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's his curricula vitae is more than impressive.
Absolutely. And I think, I don't know him beyond the conversation we've had, but he does strike me as somebody who, to kind of go back to a theme we talked about earlier, you're kind of getting through the gigs, and it's work in this industry. And I'm going here because I want to kind of use it to introduce somebody else I want to talk to you about. About a year and a half ago when I had Richard Duguay on the channel, we were talking about that because he's got a certain thing, and I'm guilty of it myself. I was out to dinner with him one night, and of course I had to whip out the spaghetti incident, and have him sign it. And I'm like, oh God. Yeah, I think we've all, if we're fortunate, there are some things that people will find interesting, not necessarily financially lucrative, but interesting, cool things that come up. But at the end of the day, I think we're all just at varying degrees, kind of just getting through it and getting, keeping the lights on, paying the air conditioning bill,
Yeah,
working, it's work. So I think some artists just don't realize their impact sometimes as well, because you're just kind of getting through it. You know,
yeah,
you're too in the moment to realize, oh, this is going to be significant in 10 years, or this is going to end up in a book in 20 years, or what
yeah,
have you.
yeah,
So I remember talking to Richard about that, how it's about just kind of getting through it and trying to stay ahead of, industry changes, staying ahead of financial changes, staying ahead of everything that we have to deal with just to be able to do what we do.
Mhm.
So that's my very long-winded way of saying you also play with Richard Duguay. So we should get into Richard because I love him.
It's interesting. You mentioned the spaghetti incident, and I really was not aware of that. That wasn't a factor with me when I was like, oh, I should uh, play with this guy, or I should. I certainly didn't seek that out. Um, I first noticed him that he, as I said, that he showed. I'd heard his name, but
Mhm.
I showed up at Lauren's invitation to the first the recording of the Slamdinistas' first album, and so then I realized quickly he had very very good ears, and also I guess I should say that in a way that I agree with, and this that something would come up and we both kind of look at each other like, not that something was correct or incorrect. I would just it would be nice if we could accent this or highlight this thing. We would hear things in a very similar way. So that, okay, like this guy, and I think he had seen me track some songs. I don't think he was there for all the recordings, but he'd seen me play enough. And after those Slamdinistas sessions were over, uh, really out of the blue, I got a call from him in this very understated, quiet way. Uh, I'm producing a single for a guy. You want to come out and play on this thing? Okay. So I came up and played on a single for another local guy. Cause I Said So was the name of the song, and it was really cool, and it was really a joy to work with him much closer, because now he wasn't sort of the guy that was quietly trying to be unobtrusive but still offer creative input as in the Slam Denise's recording sessions. Now he's the guy, and we really zoned in with each other on how some of these things should be, or at least how we thought they should be. So yeah, that continued on. Then it was like, hey, you want to come and record on one of my songs? Yeah, I would like that. And his songs are really, I mean, they were the first album I did I've done two albums for Richard. It's called Beautiful Decline was the first one. The second one, the band that now on the second one's called Richard Duguay and the Beautiful Decline, and that's an album called Second Prize. But the Beautiful Decline album is very theatrical,
Yeah.
so for lack of a better term, and not certainly not pejorative at all. Very very much Alice Cooperish in texture and approach, and there's some great rockers, but there's also some piano songs and some very atmospheric stuff, all twisted, because that's Richard. um, and so that's been and those songs ain't easy. Those songs were challenging, and so that was probably the thread that runs through mine. Was I loved the challenge of doing that. I didn't want to let those songs beat me, and I wanted to do a good job for them. But those were challenging. Very
That is Beautiful Decline. That came out, I think, in 2019. Um, yeah, I could be wrong. Sorry, Richard, but I think it was 2019. That was my favorite album of that year. I thought that was such a beautiful record. And really, really an achievement for him and for you and everyone else involved. And it was such a gorgeous album.
Yeah, yeah. He played. I think he played all the guitars and all the bass on that, and piano. And I don't know who else was outside, and I did the drums. And that's why the album after that was so different, because it was a band thing.
Yeah.
But, yeah, that's a real source of pride to have been able to do that. And now we're buddies. But it was a slow process. We would record one song at a time. It wasn't like, hey, come and do the album. I was on probation for 10 songs or 8 songs, whatever the hell it was. But he's always a pro, like Lauren. Lauren's the ultimate pro. So I get to play with Lauren in my third band now.
Excellent.
And Lauren and Richard are good buddies. They do stuff in Richard's studio together for the things that they have going.
Yeah, it's a nice family of musicians. And another very good friend of mine is Paul Rossler. I know you've worked with Paul.
Such a talented guy. Wow.
Oh, he's the word genius, I think, is tossed around a little too liberally these days. Everybody's a genius. No, Paul Rossler is that category for me. I mean, I've sat in his studio and he's played me 45-minute songs that he wrote when he was a teenager. I mean, the guy is from somewhere else. I love him to death. He's just a beautiful person as well, but his talent is just.
But it's interesting. The guy can be so esoteric, and he was telling us about these 45-minute songs. Well, I can't do that. That is, I gotta trim it down to 37 minutes. Right on, buddy. He said, but the thing with him is he produces all kinds of different music, and I'm a song guy. For me, I like a 3-minute song, and he's a genius at doing that, and he's also phenomenal at doing the long form stuff. I've actually done 2 albums at his studio. The first one I did with a fellow named Mike Livingston was like boogie woogie piano, barrel house piano. That was really fun at Kitten Robot with Paul Rosler, and then the new Slams record, Wild Restless, we did at Kitten Robot also, and he was he was there every day, and good ears, good suggestions, and we're all watching like a hawk. So it didn't take much for him to transmit to us, give it another whack. Or we really, actually, you know what, that one we really tried to have a much more intense vibe on this new record than the last one, and much more street. We played in New York about a year or so ago, and hooked up with some really good people. Paul Myra from Del Rand from Underground Garage, and when we finally played there, all they knew of us was the first album. And we played, and they said, "Geez, we hear your songs, and they sound so polished, and now we see you play, and you're like some down and dirty, Faces rock band." Like, maybe we should go back. And so the new album, we tried to be a little bit more down and dirty.
And the new album it's behind you as well, but I'll flash it up here
Hey, what a cool
uh,
motorcycle.
without the filter working against me. Here we go. And
Yeah,
it's Wild and Restless by the Slamdinistas.
yeah,
Beautiful record, fantastic record.
yeah.
And I definitely wanted to bring the conversation to this because all roads kind of lead to this record. This is a band you have with Lauren currently. Um, and we've mentioned Lauren a few times. That's Lauren Molinaire for the viewer. Uh, a-
Gabriel Johns is the lead singer, and Mike Gavigan is the other co-lead guitar player, and Peter is our bass player. In fact, that how we got started was Lauren had produced a solo album for Gabriel Johns, really talented singer-songwriter, and uh, and then for Gabe's second album, Gabe called Lauren back to produce it, and Lauren wanted it to be. They both wanted it to be tougher, and so hence I got the call, and we started during COVID, wearing masks. 20. It was like the three of us in this big triangle, 20 feet away from each other, in an office that was couldn't even get in certain rehearsal studios. And Gabe would bring in these singer-songwriter songs, and Punky Lauren and Hard Rocky Brian would distill them, and that was how we got started with the slams. That's how those songs sort of got blended.
Mm.
Was all of us putting that together. But it was started as Gabriel John's second solo
Mm.
album, and then it grew.
It's a fantastic record. I knew it was going to be, because oh well, Lauren's got a thing. It's going to be great. Um, but like you said, faces. We just lost David Joe. I would tell people who love the Dolls, this is the record for you. This is the 2025 um, version of that, for want of a better description. If you're into that vibe, this is a great record to check out. There's a new video. I'm going to link that in the video description for this interview, so
Where I
people,
belong.
check that out and really support what you guys are doing. There's a lot of history in this band, obviously, a lot of high level, high tier musicianship. And if you're new to the band, you know what you're going to get just by listening to this conversation and the history and the kind of music these guys have played in the past. Really strong record. Can't recommend it enough. Um, how do things look for the rest of the year for the band? What are some things you've got going on?
Well, we have a record release party on May 3rd at the Redwood, one of our favorite places in LA. They have a brand new stage, and I hear a new PA coming. It's just a great place to play. Um, the on the 14th, the video "Where I Belong" debuted. We debuted it with Spill Magazine, and you can find it on Spill Magazine and on YouTube. "Where I Belong" by the Slamdinistas. Um, we're on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, Twitter. They can order. We had this time. We've got, as you can see over my shoulder, the vinyl, and they can pre-order the vinyl, CDs, downloads on Bandcamp. I have a sort of a promo copy, but the CD is going to have a little poster in it and all kinds of behind the scenes photos with Paul Rosler at Kitten Robot Studios. And the CD, since it's a format where you can get more music on it than an LP, actually includes three versions of a very cool song that will be coming out. And Paul did a dance mix on one of the songs called Latchkey Kids. So we've got a radio mix, and we've got we've got the full mix of what we played, and then we've got the dance version, which is so killer. It's good fun. There's fun songs on there. There's some really heavy songs that relate to the times we live in now. In fact, even the cover, we wanted to sort of depict sort of angst and sort of a feeling of tension. So there's a lot of different things on this record.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go link Mad in the video description for various places to hear the music. And I'd really recommend that, people who've watched the interviews I've done with Richard and Lauren, these are all guys who've been um, real mainstays of LA music, and it's great to see in 2025 there's still so much activity with all of you guys, and Paul and you know, um and some of the other guys we've talked about, our fellow drummers out there, it's longevity is increasingly rare in the music industry, so it's always a joy to see people maintain that, and keep the ball in the air.
Trying. Well, I'm excited. You asked me about what's coming the new year. I mean, we'd like to get to Europe. We're definitely hoping to go back to the East Coast. We had a real good experience touching base there. So it's either going to be the East Coast or sort of Cleveland, Detroit, that area.
Hmm.
We're really not sure yet. Those things are in planning and clearing everybody's schedules. The album and the CDs on Rumbar Records, they're in Boston. So we would really like to take advantage of that and hit Boston. Our bass player, Peter's a Boston boy. And I've got a favorite restaurant I want to hit back in Little Italy. So we kind of need to hit some of these spots. If we could hit the cities that are playing us on the radio, it would be enough tour for me. I'd be happy.
Mm, mm. There are a couple, I mean, like I said, we can go on for hours because there's so much history. There are two sort of final bullet points for now. One being, when I think about classic American rock songs, for me, there are a couple that instantly come to mind. Sonic Reducer by the Dead Boys, Search and Destroy by the Stooges. These are bulletproof rock and roll. City Slang by Sonic's Rendezvous Band. And the fourth one I would put in there for American rock is Rock of Gibraltar by the Lazy Cowgirls. So
Ah,
we got to talk about Pat Todd, who, in my opinion, is, one of the embodiments of true rock and roll. So I know you worked with Pat, so we gotta definitely dive into that for a bit.
that guy is a force of nature.
Hmm.
That guy is the real deal. Um, I was in fact, I was in a band called The Defendants, and the bass player was Rick Johnson, who was in the Lazy Cowgirls. And I'm not sure if he played bass or played guitar. Well, he plays them both, but he was in the Lazy Cowgirls. Uh, and at some point, I really wanted to go more the roots rock, rockabilly kind of thing. And believe it or not, I think I looked in either the Recycler or Craigslist, looking for I think I put myself out there, or I was looking for a drummer, and I got to go, hey, you play drums, and it's Pat Todd. Oh, I've heard of you, and so we talked for probably an hour and a half about all kinds of great roots rock stuff, and there ain't nobody that's got the bigger desire, and there ain't nobody that's got a bigger talent than that guy, and he's so revered
Hmm.
in our little town. So I went out and auditioned and learned the songs. I didn't know him, and I wasn't referred by anybody, and got the gig. Played a few gigs, and in fact, our first gig was in Las Vegas, which was hilarious because we didn't. It was at this really hardcore punk place called the Double Down.
Hmm.
And right now, I can hear musicians laughing. It's really hardcore, sticky floors,
Yep.
and the place was jam packed. Well, we didn't realize that weekend was the International Women's Roller Derby convention in Las Vegas. So we had hundreds of all these women roller derby girls dressed in all kinds of different ways. In fact, there was one couple of women roller derby girls that got married at the club. One was wearing like a Swedish horns on a helmet, and so Pat and I and I was in the Rankoutsiders for a short time, recorded on two of their albums, and And after that, uh, I moved on to some other things that were a little more hard rock. Pat and I stayed very close friends. We have a great respect. We still get together and dine. We should do it more often, but we try to do it once a month at our favorite pizza place. And I've always loved his songs. I felt that they were really heart of Americana and of his unique uh, vision of life, really. And I always thought sometimes he plays acoustic guitar when he plays in the Rankoutsiders, or he just lead sings. And I said, you know what? Why don't we try just doing your acoustic guitar stripped down, and I'll just play. I do a thing with like a stomp in my boot and a maraca and a ching ring on the hi hat, and so we started going out and doing Pat Todd stripped down,
Mm.
and we might bring in, and then there was a couple times where it would be one of the guitar players from the Rankoutsiders, and Pat and I continued on for, geez, a few years, I think 2 or 3 years off and on, doing the same songs but stripped down to acoustic. And he continued on with his hard rock and Rankoutsiders, a beautiful thing. And he and I and one or two other people from his band would do the songs and just bare bones, and they would make you weep. They
Yeah.
just they just really hit close to the bone, and I felt that was a really great way to interpret his songs. So I still love them, and in fact I do the same kind of thing. I do that with Gabriel on songs that aren't even anything like Slamdinistas. It's a completely different thing, and it really gets down to the heart of the song.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think he's brilliant. I think, we all in our life experience just as music fans have those songs that just changed things for us. For me, it's, well, the entire Raw Power album, for example.
Yeah.
Um, Blitzkrieg Bop by the Ramones got me into this whole thing.
Yeah.
But when I heard Rock of Gibraltar, I remember the day it happened, like where I was, and I was only 10 years old at the time. And I heard this song, and it's just like, it. You know what the real thing is the second it begins. And that's one of those perfect, perfect singer, perfect sound. I mean, that's like you put that in the Smithsonian, like this is rock and roll. I mean, it's that level for me. So
Yeah.
I'm glad Pat came up on this channel finally, because I think the guy's a genius. He is another genius for sure.
Yeah, and that guy does not stop. Like he's always writing, always performing, and uh, he has all of our respect. It's a really nice community in LA, and a lot of us have. There's all kinds of different permutations. I'm really proud to have played with Pat and to have recorded with him. Those were that was with Earl Mankey also. That's so funny. 20 or 30 years after, in the 80s, recording with Earl Mankey with that band, the guy from Nick Gilder, and then 30 years later, back with Earl Mankey with Pat Todd.
Mhm.
How
Yeah.
about that?
I love stuff like that. I love those connections and reconnections and narratives, because like you said, you do realize just how, you never quite know what's around the corner, and sometimes it means going back to something you've done, or working with people in a different light, and that's what keeps it exciting is, if you have the ability, the possibilities really are endless, in this pond of LA or Chicago or Boston, wherever you happen to be. Um, Earlier, you mentioned Bunny Carlos, and I want to kind of conclude on this because um, Bunny plays into the fact that in addition to being just a performer behind the drum kit, you are heavily involved in trading and selling vintage drums. And I know that's been something you've been doing for many, many years. And I suppose that's how you got involved with Bunny, and just in general, tell us a bit about this endeavor with the actual trading and
I,
the.
I love the history of it, and probably back in the 70s, I started buying vintage drums. And when I say vintage drums, I mean Slingerland Radio Kings from the late 30s, and I would in some cases, I would have to buy 2 or 3 kits to put one kit together that had lugs that would work in one thing or another, and I would play them on stage. When I played with Glenn Cornick and strings with the violin, viola, and cello, I played a 1938 Radio King kit, 26, 13, 16. So I would play that stuff live, and I would buy this stuff and keep the best stuff and sell off some of the others. And during that same time in the 70s, I would continue to see this name, Bunny Carlos, and he was hoarding all these vintage drums. In fact, the live at Budokan, he's playing the same era 30s Slingerland Radio King kit. His kit was Black Diamond, and my kit was White Marine Pearl. And I've been to Bunny's house numerous times, and he has a beautiful collection and has some of my old drums in his collection. And I think he still has the Budokan kit. But so we knew about each other from time to time. We would communicate, and the jungle drums. What about this guy and what about that guy? And I'm looking for this piece. Do you know somebody that has this piece? And he and I were both collecting really the rarest of the rare, not common stuff. So often we were in competition, and eventually got to know each other. I would go to the Chicago Drum Show, which is like people come from all over the world for all this vintage stuff, and we've done a lot of deals together and found things for each other. In fact, this dear friend, Bunny gave me one of his Cheap Trick kits, and I still have that kit. It sounds amazing. It's a modern kit. He endorses Ludwig, and it's a modern Ludwig kit, 26-inch bass drum. And I played that kit a lot with Cheap Trick. Excuse me, I misspoke, not Cheap Trick. I played that with Glitter Trash with Lauren. And so all my vintage stuff, I put to work. I've had some drums that people go, oh, don't even touch it. And don't breathe on it. Like, these are tools. I mean, I'm here to use these. And if I can't use them, I'll move them along. So that's how we know Bunny, and we've gifted each other some pretty amazing stuff. He's a great guy. He's a super guy. He's always been a good friend.
That's excellent, excellent, and of course, an extraordinary player. And
I try to. He laughs. I said, "Well, don't laugh at me," but I try to channel you on a couple of songs on the new record, and he just sort of gave me the Bunny Carlos tip of the hat. That's boy, does he has his own style, and I can tell you that other drummers know and respect that, and you use musician shorthand. A guitar player or bass player or a songwriter would say, "Give me a little Bunny Carlos kind of thing here," and you know what that means. You don't have to go and show a guy, or give me a Ginger Baker thing here or something, and you just know. Bunny's one of those rocks of rock and roll that that style.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well, this has been so much fun. I've really enjoyed.
Thanks for asking me.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's one of those quandaries for me. It's, what to include, what not to include, because it's so sprawling. And I hope this gives the viewer a nice overview of some of the highlights of your career. Again, check out the new album by the Slamdinistas. Lauren's a good buddy of mine. I'm always happy to promote him. He's one of the true legends of LA punk and rock. It's great to see he's still doing stuff. So the links will be in the video description. As far as the future, Brian, please stay in touch, and you're always welcome to come back if you've got something project-wise or music-wise you want to get into. I would absolutely love to have you back sometime.
Well, thank you, and you better contact me for a beer or burger, or Richard and I'll take you to some of our special haunts.
Nice.
You and Lauren and I, and Richard will go out and grab a bite. But it's been a pleasure. I appreciate meeting with you, and I'd love to hear back. And thanks for letting us hawk this thing. And we're on Bandcamp, and you can pre-order the album and enjoy it. I hope everybody. I'm really proud of this. Hope everybody enjoys it.
Absolutely. Take care, my friend.
Thank you. Thanks, Joel.